All right. Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody.
So,
Hope you're tuning in well. It's episode 9. Over a little bit over 2 months running now. Semester's almost over. We're moving into the
so,
last week. Got these finals coming up. Hopefully, some people still be able to tune in and get a little conversations with history. Y'all know how it works by now, so we'll just get started. What's going on, brother?
man, same old stuff, just grading, wrapping up finals, dealing with like tying up loose ends, making sure everybody's grades are where they're supposed to be based on what they do. A lot of
Mhm.
cats are like, Mrs. Dogs, can I get this? Mrs. Dogs. I had one student, I was like, yo, do you drop any of your exams? I go, we only got three of them. How many you want me to drop? Like, it but and it just goes to show like if you're asking that question, then you don't get this class at all.
Mhm.
Does that make you know what I'm saying? Like the fact that you would even ask something like that means you don't understand how I operate at all.
Yeah.
And I tell my students, I'm like, yo, man, this ain't no math class where, you know, and then granted, we teach required courses,
Right.
so they're like, oh man, I'm not no history major. I'm not no English major. And obviously, you're not an English major. We get that. That's for sure. But when these cats don't know history, then that's why we run into the problem with the people that we're running into problems with, thinking that they know history, denying the Holocaust,
Mhm.
misrepresenting the Nazi Party, believing that we can extrapolate or maybe even um, uh, you know infer that this person is that or that person is this. Like it's the lack of history that's resulting in a lot of these problems. And then I'll have people like some of my peers. What I mean by that is like my family and stuff, not like not somebody like on an academic tip, but a lot of my well, we need to be mindful of giving these individuals platforms because they're spewing misinformation, and I get that for real, I do. But yet at the same time, we're readily acknowledging that the general audience or the general populace is not educated enough to delve deeper into something before they start believing in something. That we really don't trust the general population to make informed decisions because when they're being informed, yes, they may be misinformed. That's true, but then they don't take the extra step that is necessary to differentiate. Do I put this in my body? Do I consume this simply because they put it in front of me? Last week we were having a conversation about veganism.
Yeah, for sure.
Just because someone puts something on your plate doesn't mean you have to eat it.
Hmm.
You pick and choose what you choose to put in your body, and a lot of times, you put a lot of trust in the chef or the person that's preparing the food or the place in which you buy the food from. But you can still inspect. I go to get and no disrespect to anybody that's about veganism and whatnot, but when I buy ground beef, it tells me grade A. But when I get to the house, I'm still checking that piece out. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't think, like, oh, okay, I see a brown spot here. We're removing that. Like I never take everything at face value, and I feel like sometimes there's this general consensus then that we can't trust the American people to take things at face value. They're not responsible enough, so we have to protect them by way of like this paternal censorship.
Yeah, man, that's interesting. This idea of taking things at face value. It's funny how people always tend to take things at face value when they don't know really what it is, right? Like so if your water leaks and you call up the plumber and the plumber says you got a leaky pipe, rarely do you question that plumber. You take it at face
Right.
value, you pay him the money and he fixes it, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, or your roof, or whatever the case may be. We have a tendency in this very hyper capitalist society to just pay for the things that we need. And oftentimes that uh, um, that
I get
sort
what
of
you're getting at.
comfort or ability to do that problematically gets translated or trickles into areas that it doesn't need to be in. like history. Now, on the flip side, you got somebody like me, because I don't take anything at face value. I try to do everything on my own. I ain't calling that plumber. I'm gonna figure out how to do it myself. And then it ended up taking me months. My wife was screaming at me because I had a hole in the front yard when we walked up into the house for like eight months before I finally got it fixed. All I had to do was just call somebody. He'd come fix it. But I have this compulsive thing to figure out everything if it becomes a problem, and maybe to the detriment of my health and my time. And so there's always a balance on what you should who you should rely on for information and why, right? And when we're talking about history, something just on an intellectual level, not just history, but just information, man. Um, so many people don't have time to invest in learning the material. My students, be saying that all the time. Well, I don't, I didn't read this. Why? I don't have time, or I didn't think about this. I don't have time. Like, you got to make time if you want to do something in life, because you can cut the corners, but when you don't invest the time to learn something, you make these types of mistakes. And in a world where we're constantly on the go and everybody's constantly doing their thing, they don't necessarily focus enough on these specific aspects. But I think it's important, and that's one of the things in college is why you got to take so many different subjects. People are, wow, why do I got to take math? They ain't never going to use this. Why I got to do that? I ain't got to use this. Well, there's value in looking at all these different forms or categories of knowledge and learning something about investigating them. Maybe not for the knowledge. You're never going to have to make that equation again. But the whole process of, let me look at this, let me focus on the rules of this and try to see if I can't navigate through this game with these rules. There's a value in being able to do that in all these other different dimensions. And it gets you kind of thinking about steps, which is important because, man, people today, they maybe not just today, but they focus on what you say or how you say it more so than what you say. If you can convince somebody, if you can say something good enough or fancy enough, a lot of times they won't question what you're saying. They'll just go with it because that confidence, makes them think, oh, well, I can just rely on what they're saying because my society makes me have to do that anyway. I can't do the plumbing. I can't do the roofing. I can't, you know what I mean? And so you end up getting in this situation where somebody says something really nice and really, somebody like Kanye who can wax poetically in some aspect and put words together in a nice way to make people listen to him, start saying some just wild nonsense, and people may believe them. And so that platform issue that you mentioned, yeah, I don't know, man. I'm conflicted on this.
Me too.
I think giving people platforms is fine as long as the person giving them the platform does the research to provide the counter narrative available to really put that person in their place if they act up.
Or just perspective in general.
Sure.
One thing I wanted to say real quick is, maybe I was a bit dismissive on, like, man, I ain't never gonna learn that Pythagorean theorem or need that Pythagorean theorem again. That's never gonna affect my life in the way that history might. And what I mean by that is, if cats don't understand history, well, then they end up supporting individuals, politicians, cats that can have an effect on my life simply because you're not as knowledgeable as you could be on a historical topic. So that does affect me, or it does affect somebody that I care about. The fact that you don't know what's up, you not knowing the Pythagorean theorem ain't never going to change my life. But what I did hear you say, though, is that, man, you may not use the formula for that equation again, but by taking that math class, it's valuable because it does teach you a process.
Right.
And that there's a process to learning.
Right.
And that when you take in history, or when you take in news, or you take in information, even if it's from sources that you deem to be credible, there's still a process by which you digest that information.
Right.
And so I think there's value in, a required course like math because it teaches you processes. Like in our class, we may not teach a process. We may teach a headspace. We teach perspective, and they teach you. I would imagine it's more like fundamentally based, where, okay, after you do this, then we do that. There's an order of operations is what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
And
my
I think
pops
I think
saying that
I think
about
there's value in that.
yeah, my pops say that about economics. Like, oh well, there's you know, it's a little bit different than what y'all do. I got to give them these rules and these formulas and stuff like that. There's value in learning the process. Absolutely, 100%. I'm not biased or anything, but obviously history is the most superior of these disciplines because uh, it's in everything. All your processes, all your whatever you want to call them, when you're disciplined, they have a history. Everything has a history. It all begins with a history. And so if you want to be a great nurse, well, learn the history of nursing. If you want to be a great businessman, learn the history of business. Learn what people have tried and have tried, not tried, where they succeeded, where they didn't succeed. Learn the history. And so it all comes back to the history. So you need to learn the process of the history. You need to learn how to filter information. You need to learn how to question information. You need to know what's kind of like acceptable information, what's debatable, what's completely out there, uh you know and the thing is with history is kind of this, it's difficult, man. It's like a catch 22 in a way, because like there are acceptable things in each society that are wrong, that people aren't questioning that they should. Then there are things that are just some people say in a society that are so out there that nobody's listening to because they're completely out there. Then there's people who are saying things that no one's listened to that they think is completely out there, but really they have value later on, right? And so there's all these different things going on at once in a society, particularly one like ours that has this worldwide web, um, that just shoots information everywhere, and it's more difficult, I think, today to kind of siphon which path certain views or information belongs to and which ones you have to kind of see and not see, and pay attention to and dismiss. But I think that's one of the important things about always sort of entertaining information, but then running it through the gamut in your mind of other information that you have come across, right? That's what we do in peer reviewed literature. If I write a book, it's not just going to get published unless it's a vanity press. I want to go out there and publish it myself, and anyone can buy it. But if it's going to go through a publishing process of peer review, there's going to be experts who know the field, who know what they're doing. They're going to look at your stuff and then give you feedback. On the other hand, right? We don't just throw books out there because we belong to a community of knowledge where we care. We could easily throw books out there if we want, but that's why you got to pay attention to the press, pay attention to the publication, pay attention to who wrote the book, under what structures was this book published, and why. Um,
Do you think
and
that oh, go ahead.
by all means too, it's important to understand that the structure ain't always the end all be all. There are cracks within all structures that one can find and pinpoint, and eventually you can kind of like investigate those cracks so much that they widen and the whole structure comes tumbling down for a new structure to be built on, information to be built on. But it's hard to kind of see, when you're going too far, when you're looking at something that's way too far versus just buying into the status quo narrative. It's very difficult sometimes to navigate that, but just because something's difficult don't mean we ain't got to do it.
I think because it is difficult, we have to do it.
Absolutely.
You know, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I'm going to ask you the question, and I'm going to let you handle it. Because, Kyrie, the basketball player, got into a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Where he had to go through a bunch of steps to prove that he was no longer anti-Semitic simply because he retweeted a link to a DVD that had some questionably anti-Semitic ideas in it. And so he had to prove that he wasn't anti-Semitic, as if he was ever going to play basketball for the Brooklyn Nets ever again. Jerry Jones is over here in a picture protesting, and I don't hear the NFL telling him that he needs to denounce racism. I don't hear the NFL telling him that he needs to take a class and promote this or that, or take 5 days off the season, or 5 games off you know what I'm saying? Like, there's this weird situation where we're talking, well, this guy has a platform, he's using Twitter and he's a star athlete. Well, there's no owner as magnanimous as Jerry Jones is, but he doesn't catch that same heat simply because somebody put out a tweet. Now, here's the other thing I wanted to add on top of this, because we ain't even at the question yet. Let's just take that into context,
Sure.
right? Kyrie's catching heat for sharing a link to some information. Amazon is not in trouble,
right,
for making money off of sharing the link to that information. That's not a problem at all. And I've run into individuals about this because I've had a lot of conversations as to whether or not if this is okay. Should you give that person a platform? Should we be talking about this? Should we be entertaining these ideas? Should we be listening to this type of rhetoric because it's anti this, anti that? Do you think people should be able, and here's the question, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Should people be allowed to read my comp?
Absolutely.
Okay. Even though we know it promotes hate speech,
yeah,
anti-Semitic rhetoric,
yeah,
ideology, pathology, that we know, and we have evidence that it has incited groups to think, behave, and act a certain way. If my comp, if you think that we should be allowed to read that, why isn't Kyrie allowed to promote that link? Why or how is it that we don't hold Amazon accountable for promoting this book? And maybe it's because, well, the NBA is a private organization, but do you think like controversial text like Mein Kampf, should that be allowed to be read by the general public? And then if so, then shouldn't all items, even if it is anti-Semitic, shouldn't that be allowed for general consumption?
I mean, so from what I've studied, I guess, maybe from the trials of Socrates, which ultimately culminated in his death because of things he was teaching, to Shin Huangdi in China burning Confucius books because he didn't want them, all the way up to Soviet censorship, Nazi book burning. I think if you look at history, it's far better to allow people to read potentially hate-induced literature than it is to have a government that prohibits any such literature. Because once you justify eliminating one such literature, it becomes quite arbitrary and difficult to continue to have the literature you want banned when you're no longer in power, because the other people come in and they start maybe banning your literature, right? And so what happens is these banning of literatures tend to happen in one party states, authoritarian regimes who are trying to send a certain message. And I would say there's a problem. You can promote maybe like minimizing it, not you can probably have some laws against maybe advertising for certain things. We'd have to get a little bit in the weeds here. Kind of reminds me of the Supreme Court situation that's going on right now, where they were arguing about black Santas and kids in Ku Klux Klan robes.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So what's protected speech and what's not protected speech, right? Like, you can't, walk up into a classroom these days with a fake gun, talk about I'm ready to kill people, because there's right some problems with people killing people. So you may be able to make some maybe regulations I would say. But anytime we're talking about banning something for people to read, I'm not with that, man, because
But Brad, and by the way, I'm being facetious. But if we don't do that, then you're creating a space for them to take in that information and then exact acts of violence, acts of hate, and you're creating and contributing, corroborating that environment when you allow these type of texts to exist.
yeah, I mean,
Why? I mean, what benefit are we going to get from having Mein Kampf out there? And
oh man, there's a lot of benefits, I think.
yeah, anti-Semitic speech is what you're going to get.
I mean, if we're being real, I mean, Mein Kampf is just a real difficult, weird, strange book. I mean, you could tell this fool didn't even really write it as much as he did like lecture. It'd be like if someone was just transcribing what we're doing right here, word for word, then publishing it. It's a rant. It's all out over the place. In fact, I don't know. From my perspective, reading it may make one become less white supremacist because of how delusional it is, and you lose that capacity. I mean, I feel like the people who are going to go and cite violence for messing around with Mein Kampf are going to be doing it anyway. They're going to be doing it with some other reason. It's going to be something else,
Right.
a book that's inspiring them. um so I think there's a problem with like promoting it on a government level, or like if you're embracing it and endorsing it, I think
Well,
maybe
what I mean by like the government wouldn't necessarily do it, but when we in our society, like we wouldn't like would it be okay to have it at Barnes and Noble? Is it okay to have it at Amazon? Because Amazon's a global bookstore. Like people are on Amazon every day for no reason, waiting for their packages to show up. Can
yeah.
I order from Amazon Mein Kampf? Is that cool? Or and the fact that I'm ordering, or if I recommended it to somebody, is that such a bad thing? Like
No, I don't think it is. And I think we when we start talking about getting rid of this thing, uh, we divert attention away from having a conversation about it, and we need to have a conversation about it in the right manner, in ways in which the battle of ideas can unfold. Um, I mean, Germany bans certain types of literature, right? Because of the Holocaust.
at the
Uh,
state level.
yeah. I mean, so it happens. It probably, it's not one of these things that we ban books and then all of a sudden we're going to turn into a totalitarian regime. It's like these things chip away over time. Like you slowly begin to gain, give, at least according to the American constitutional philosophy, is this idea that you keep giving away rights slowly until you become engulfed. Right? I mean, we used to have a 0% income tax in this country, and when the first one came out in 1913, everybody freaked out because it was like a few percentage, and then it went up to 1930s to like the highest tax bracket was like 75% of your income was taken for the richest people. I mean, that was only 10 people during the Great Depression. But then it went, now it's like 35% for the richest people. And people debating about this. Look what it started out and look where it's become. Um, when it comes to like knowledge and free speech, I feel like the United States has been one of the most rapidly growing uh, places for intellectual thought to be stimulated over the past 200 years because of this uh, constitutional right. And there's bad things that come with it,
Right.
certainly, but the good has outweighed the bad when it came to this situation. Um,
Yeah, I
and
saw this quote. It was like freedom of speech is dangerous.
yeah,
Censorship of speech is even more dangerous.
more dangerous. I love that quote. I certainly think that's true. There's bad problems with a lot of things, man. But what we can do is try to promote the counter arguments to these things and uplift them, uh, in hopes that more people will be gravitated to them. You're never going to get everybody, um, but in this open idea arena, it allows, I think, for those voices to drown out some of those weaker ones, right? Not drown them out enough to where we don't see, psychopaths who've kind of just become distorted reality so much that they just go up and blow something up, kill a bunch of people because of these ideas. Um, but yeah, I don't know.
Well, so like ultimately, I was thinking, you know, the evidence that we have for state censorship is one thing, right? We could look at, as you mentioned already, Stalin. We could probably think of China, which is a modern example of state censorship. However, in the United States, maybe why it is different, or maybe why some might entertain it, is because it's never state sponsored. It's usually private individuals or private organizations, and in their cohort of sort, they are willing to entertain the censorship of certain texts or certain DVDs, because we're addressing various mediums that are relevant. But the bottom line is that they're willing to entertain censorship for the sake of the common good, but it's always from a private perspective, never from a state level. And
Right.
therefore, would that be okay? Because it's of the people.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you can do about canceling somebody. What is canceling? It's just like you're trying to promote enough people to pressure something, to remove a platform or silence something, right? And so you're constantly going to be struggling for that in the private sector. What do you do about that? I mean, the government can't come over here and force you to sell everything. There's this issue going on about discrimination, though, right? Like, does a Christian anti LGBTQ person who doesn't want to sell a cake to a same-sex marriage couple, is that person going to have to sell the cake to them? I think the Supreme Court's going to say, well, the question is not, do I have to sell the cake to them? The question is, are you withholding your services because of hate or discrimination? If we can prove that you're withholding services because of hate or discrimination, then you can get in trouble, right? So,
But they're still not protected. I thought, was there
they're still discussing.
an amendment clause to that where they added uh, gender equality to the Civil Rights Act of '64?
I think to some degree,
I didn't realize. I thought they were still not
in the
protected.
workforce, maybe, there's certain things like nation stuff like that. Right now with the Marriage Act, I think marriage has become protected. Yeah, this is another time.
Because I thought that case was already settled, and it sounds like they just brought it back up. This issue with the cake, because the argument was simply go find another place to get a cake.
Right. They're debating right now as to whether or not this is going to be ruled. I don't really know. This is where we need our Professor Emeritus Tovanche to school us properly on these legal matters. But it still is an interesting question about, what are you forced to participate in, and what are you not forced to participate in?
Right.
And I think the issue is, you can't discriminate against race, sex, or gender anymore. How we define that is kind of difficult, because
gender's included.
Say it again.
I don't recall gender being included. or is it sexual orientation that wasn't included?
Sexual orientation, maybe. Yeah. Hmm.
No fact checking, y'all. We don't know shit, man. Sometimes we don't know stuff.
I'm too busy. I'm too busy thinking about all these other things, man. I'm
So many
lost.
things.
Yeah. I need to brush up on some of this legal history. I mean, I know they're debating stuff right now, right? I mean, they're talking about this issue about uh, a black Santa Claus. Does a black man dressed in a Santa Claus uniform have to see a kid who comes to him with a Ku Klux Klan robe and take a
But
picture of him, right?
well,
Or
I thought that unfortunate analogy was brought up in relation to the LGBTQ cake situation. Isn't
yeah,
that the okay?
yeah, which was just last week, right? So
Right,
they're about to rule, I guess, on whether or not uh, the people have to sell the cake to them.
right.
Um,
Which should inform us all, if that be the case, that gender is not protected.
right. If
We wouldn't be having this conversation if it was protected. Obviously, it's not.
right. Um, yeah, I mean, the thing is, man, in this world is like all this stuff starts with somebody trying to do something, they can't do it, they argue for it, they get a lawyer, and it goes all the way up to the courts, and then
Right.
they make these decisions on them, right? Um,
You
so
know, they're hearing. Speaking of which, go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, it could be happening all over, and nobody ever say anything about it until someone gets the money and time and energy to
Right.
go get a lawyer and start talking about all these types of things, right? And so the idea is to what extent are is this like hurting people? Is this disadvantaging someone? That's where the conversation starts with the question of whether or not you need to rule it. Now we take that back to our censorship question, and it's sort of like, do you have a right to sell material that's discriminatory against people?
And that's interesting, right? Because there is a link there. Because you just said, do we have a right to sell material that's discriminatory towards people? And then the other issue is, do I have a right to not sell my services because
Right.
I'm engaging in discriminatory? So it's like, in this particular case, if I push out the material because I'm not acting on it, it may not be a crime. For example, I may be a hub where I provide access to something, but like, for example, illegal streaming. You'll see a lot of illegal streaming sites,
Right.
and they'll tell you, we do not authorize you using our services. But if you use our services, and it's like, the ownership is always usually on the individual
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
that
that
consumes.
reminds me of cannabis shops too, right? Cannabis is illegal, but you can go on the street and buy all this drug paraphernalia for free. So what do you think these people are coming here buying this stuff for? Like
It's not drug
culture?
paraphernalia, dude. It's
Buying
they're water pipes. Relax. God dang, dog.
like I can go buy this. Well, you think I'm going to use it as a sculpture? That is it going to go
Yeah.
on my shelf? Like,
It's
but
it's
but
it's a
if I
glass blown
illegal,
ornament.
yeah, like come on, or we've mentioned this before about drinking and driving, like bars all over the place,
But
but you're
but
illegal to
that
bar and drive.
that is the hypocrisy of this country, where we act and we pretend. That is the phoniness of this nation, that we pretend that this ain't going on when we know good damn and well it is going on. We walk into a head shop. I don't even know why it's called a head shop, but we walk into a smoke shop and they're selling water pipes. And yeah, exactly. What you think he's gonna go put it in his knick-knack set, his knick-knack nook? Like, what the?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
thing is about to get blown up. Like,
right.
like, why are we even pretending that this? And then we talk about, like, well, this is and speaking of which, talking about obscene, right? Oh, you shouldn't be doing this because this is going to promote hate and violence. All right, cool. Shut down all pornography.
Mm.
How about where you have BDSM pornography, where you got these, and then they make the argument, well, this is art. So shut your line. You know good and well this ain't art. This ain't art. You know good, but we lie. That's the problem I have with all of this, is that it's all predicated on a lot of lies. Like, yo, that kid ain't, like you just mentioned. Like, If somebody's reading Mein Kampf, they're probably already, they're just waiting for you to give me a reason to go and commit the type of dumb stuff they want to probably already do. They were going to do it. They just needed a push.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why they're going to do it, right? That's why we can't just focus on that book because there's other they're already in the process. So, you know, let's talk a little bit about this hypocrisy or lie or all these things that you said. I would go so far as to say that this is the founding principle of the United States of America. We like to talk about founding fathers and all this other stuff, but the founding principle of the United States of America is hypocrisy. It begins when we say all men are created equal.
Okay, fair enough.
Which we are enslaving tens of thousands of people. It begins with the fact that the country was, the idea for independence came because we were being called out for our illegal trade activity, right? It was all good when the hypocrisy was there, when England was turning a blind eye and benignly neglecting all the illegal smuggling and transactions that were going on. But when they start calling out the hypocrisy, we go to war over our hypocrisy. We say, "Oh no, taxation without representation." Man, you was illegally selling things out of government tax control forever, and when you get called out on it, you want to get upset about it, and you want to create a system that will allow you to continue to lie and create the hypocrisy. You've made so much money and identity off of it that you decided to peel away from the British Empire to more perfectly perfect the hypocrisy. And so that's where we're at. We live in a country that allows you to go do all of these things, and put small little rules to where if you get caught in the wrong scenario or the wrong situation, they ritualistically persecute you, right? You can't drink and drive, but we're going to give you all these bars everywhere to go in and drink and drive. And hopefully you're lucky enough to get away with it, but we'll persecute some of you. We're going to have all these paraphernalia things. You can't use these things, but you're more than welcome to come in and buy them. I mean, come on.
Or better yet, like, yo, we don't like a lot of drugs unless they're the drugs that we can control and sell you.
Right. Exactly.
So these drugs are okay, but those drugs, no. From those other countries, you can't have those. No. But sure, prescription pills only in America that the FDA approves, we got you. Yeah. You bring in medication from other countries, we can't have that. No. We got to protect you. And by the way, that's the epitome of mercantilism, which is the whole economic system that the so-called revolutionaries, founding fathers were against. They hated the fact that the mother country was siphoning off their wealth and their revenue to benefit them as almost like some sort of middleman, and that in order to make money in this country, you had to, pay tribute to a degree to England. And, you look at us today, you can't make money in this country with the Social Security number without them getting a taste. They gotta get, so they've become the very thing that we used to hate, but right. We don't learn those founding principles. We end up learning about a founding father. We may not learn about a founding principle. And I when you first said it, I was like, get out of here. And then when you finished, I was like, oh shit, yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, man, I love that because that's why when I talk about the American Revolution, I don't waste all my time on this Sugar Act and Quartering Act and Act this, Act that. Come on, like 100 different little acts here. Like y'all want to read about that, fine. But let me tell you what's really going on here. Like, I like to use tea because of the way in which tea became a symbol. Like what's interesting about history is symbolism, is meaning, is how societies invest meaning into the things that they use and why they use them and how they distinguish the way they use them compared to the way others use them. And with tea, you have this fascinating commodity that was uh, drastically inflated in price due to the fact that it was being distributed in the black market illegally,
Okay.
which always happens. Prices drastically go up, right?
Yeah.
And when the British did this tea deal that made the price of tea cheaper for colonists to consume, but added a tax on it, they sort of talked about taxation without representation and how dare they tax us and all these other types of things. But really, they were losing money. They lost money.
Right.
Tea was
Right.
cheaper. They couldn't smuggle it anymore. Nobody want to go buy your over expensive smuggled tea when they can buy a cheaper one here. And these people get upset. Well, start focusing on the tax. Oh, look at this tax that they're putting on here. Really, what you're upset with is that you can't do your illegal activity anymore. Not
Hey,
only
you
that,
know what? Oh, hey, just real quick. And go ahead. Not only that, you were right.
not only that, but the British now had also began to turn their attention towards India, and they began to reshape what it meant to be part of the British Empire. British Empire used to be like spreading the wings of liberty, rights as Englishmen, wherever you go, blah, blah, blah. And now it's sort of moving to these brown people who are uncivilized and need us to control them. And these colonists were able to use tea to symbolize the shift that was occurring in the British Empire to separate themselves. We don't want to be treated like slaves in the same way that Jefferson mentioned that word multiple times in the first Declaration of Independence draft, which they had to edit out because they thought it may cause a problem since they're enslaving so many people themselves to be talking about needing to break away because we're being enslaved. But that's what the whole thing started on right there is this notion of they're taking away our money with tea. What is this tea? Where are they getting it? Look where the British are going. They're headed towards this new second British Empire, and we can use this as a way to kind of talk about sovereignty and independence, and that's really how it all started.
Yeah, I love that. That parallel that you were making about, well, the reason they were really upset is they couldn't make the type of money they were used to making in the black market. And it reminds me a lot of like before we started even entertaining the legalization in a realistic sense, the legalization of marijuana, whether it be medicinal or recreational. I knew a lot of cats that were in the industry, and they were the biggest opponents to legalization because they're like, "Yo, that's gonna mess up my whole my whole setup about to get messed up."
Some of the most virulent anti-legalization
are the cats that are already in it.
Are the cats that are already in it. Now, many of them would be voting against it if they had the right to vote. Right?
Fair enough.
Many of them can't even vote because they been criminalized and got records. But yeah, this is a problem. Well, and of course, there's also and some of them actually who are against it will mask sort of very similar to the way the colonists masked being against the tea situation, masking it and saying, "Oh, this through the shift in the empire, and why we need to break away from them, the English." A lot of these people will be like, "Well, we're gonna lose our money with the legalization of cannabis, so we're gonna complain about it as if we're worried about big government coming in and contaminating cannabis, doing to cannabis what they did to tobacco and what they did to alcohol, and drastically taxing it and regulating it and standardizing it and lowering the quality." They'll talk about all these issues, which could very well be legitimate arguments in the same way that those founding so-called fathers had some legitimate arguments in their complaint about the British. But just like their complaint about the British began with tea, these people's complaint about the degradation of the quality of cannabis really begins with their lack ability to distribute it and make money.
Yeah, it almost makes me think like maybe I mean, and we all have the potential to be hypocrites, right? Because we change and we grow, and I tell my students, some of your best presidents, if you ever value presidents at all. Some of your best presidents will probably be hypocrites. Because they run, or I'm sorry, they get nominated by a party, right? So you get nominated by a Democratic Party, and so therefore they're expecting a Democratic president. However, once you are sworn into office, you now represent the entire people of the United States. So, sometimes you might do conservative things if you're really representative of the people, or are you still representing that party? But when you swear into that oath of office, you now take on the people. And so therefore you are inclined, you're probably should do some things that are conservative as well as representative of the party that nominated you. I think at times that gets lost on people. And you can look at some of your controversial presidents. And again, controversial, why? Because they do things that were not of their political, I guess, foundation. But as president, you have to do what you got to do when you got to do it. You ain't got time to be like, well, I need to check all the liberal boxes, or I need to check all the conservative boxes. I got to check the Democratic box. I got to check the Republican box. It's like, no, man, you're the president of this country. You got to act, and you got to make a move now. What are you going to do within the best interest of the people? And apparently, remember, that's where all this started. We the people, or we believe in, as you mentioned, hypocritically, we were all created equal. Hypocritically.
Let me clarify here. We didn't begin with we the people, right?
Right. Well, that's why I brought back. Yeah. That's 1978. That's Constitution. But we can make an argument now. We can make an argument, and I would be willing to do this in the same vein that people talk about the New Testament kind of replaces the Old Testament. But there's still one book. Don't get me wrong. In that, with the new Constitution, if you will, branded the Constitution, 78, or I'm sorry, 87, 89, whoever you want to pick your battles with. That we become a new nation under said document. And again, it's under that document we get a president, by the way. So, this whole notion of an individual not we don't have parties before that document, by the way. So we never had to worry about that type of issue. Or is this individual representative of the party, or is he representative of the people? So a lot of that is, AC, if you will, after Constitution.
Yeah.
But the moment I was bringing that up, I immediately in the midst of saying that, I was like, well, nah, I can't use Constitution because that's 1787. So let me kick it back to the Declaration of Independence real quick. And I was bringing up all men are created equal.
Yeah, and we the people. You could argue maybe quite as hypocritical as all men are created equal, because how we the people was that Constitution. You had 3 branches, and only one half of one of them was actually representing people, right? I mean, people couldn't even vote for their senators back then. The 1890s that happened. So you could vote for your House of Representatives, but even that, a good portion of the amount of representatives that Southern states got included bodies of people who weren't able to even participate in the body politic itself. So, man, this was very not for the people at all. And maybe that was the point.
And this is I don't know if you heard or if you've been paying attention as of lately, but I believe, I don't want to say Texas, but and you can fact check me later for everybody that might be listening or not listening. But there's legislation being put forward to practically have an electoral college at the state level for certain pieces of legislation. And so what that in essence is doing is eliminating this whole, again, the concept of we the people, where there's not direct democracy at the state level. It would be more of a republic. And if you were to give this cohort or this group of individuals to have final legislative say, that in essence would be stripping the people of that privilege. And I've heard that this is legislation that has been pushed forth at this, again, at the state level. It has to be at the state level. We already have this at the federal level, but that's only for selecting the president with the electoral college. If we provide that type of apparatus at the state level, I mean, you are for sure not representing. It's no longer we the people at that point. You know, it's we the oligarchy. It's we this few group of dudes that randomly select legislation here and there based on whatever. But I don't know the facts on that. But I thought I saw something from a dude that I thought was credible. Here's the thing. now we're really doubling back. You know, we were talking about you know, when you go to a doctor and they give you some advice, there's a tendency for you to. So I saw something from an individual that I believe to be credible, and then so now I believe in. I'm aware that potentially could exist. That
Man,
we may have.
Let me give a little anecdote to this too, because it's very interesting. When I wrote my dissertation on the hemp plant, and I turned it into a book about 4 years later that got published about commodifying cannabis. I found this in the dissertation section, and it made its way into the book too, where there's this book by this guy named Ernest Abel. He was a medical doctor, and he wrote a book on cannabis, a history book on cannabis in like 1980. And it was called like Marijuana, the first 12,000 years or some crap. And it became like this book that everybody cited and was like the renowned book. And I came across this weird organization in the United States called the American Provers Union, which was basically a bunch of doctors who got together and decided to prove medicines upon themselves. So they would take a medicine, they would consume it themselves, and they would document how it felt. That's why they called themselves the provers, because they proved they worked with medicine and did this. And they had representatives from all over the world on their team, on the organization. They didn't last very long. I've only found two publications that they ever created. One in 1857, one in 1859.
And, what happened? They all died. What? Trying to prove stuff. All right, cool.
And so it's funny because Ernest Abel mentions them in his book, and he cites like the 1830s as the time in which this came out. And he, in his footnote, cites this guy named F.T. Allen from the 19th century. And everybody since then just cited Ernest Abel without actually going to this Allen guy.
Right.
Because I went to the Allen guy and I looked up what he said, and he mixed up the date. He got the date wrong on the actual Provers Union document. And it shows that Abel didn't even go to the Provers Union. He just took what this Allen guy in the 19th century said about the Provers Union and regurgitated it as truth. I guess he felt he could trust Allen, took it, wrote it, and then everyone else felt that they could trust Ernest over all this time period, and just kept repeating the same mistake. And it may sound like a small, minor mistake, but actually in this case, it really messed up the timeline in which we know that cannabis as a medicine made its way across the Atlantic, and really therefore messed up everybody's understanding of its transition of why and when it became considered a negative medicine. And so this is a great example of how, yet again, we sometimes put our faith in something to be real knowledge without double checking it. And we can't always do that. It's hard to do.
Yeah, what you're talking about is in our field of work, and then in other people's field of work, it's the due diligence. Yo, do the research.
The work, man.
Before you come out and start talking this and that. Now, in the same vein, though, what we're doing right here, we're shooting from the hip. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we're just operating off of the scale and scope of our, memory and mentality. Obviously you're more versed and well-read than I am. But yeah, and then I know you do it. You should know I do it. We always implore everybody, even if I'm saying it, and if there's a shadow of a doubt, and definitely go fact check me.
Yeah.
Please go fact check me. Call me out.
Well, and here's the thing. Notice how when you say something, you're like, I've got it from this guy. I don't know yet, right? These are things that good thinkers do. Like, if you don't know, it's not okay. It's not necessarily bad to say it, but it's good to highlight where you got your information from, and we don't know for sure. That's the key. You can always tell, for those of you out there listening, the way people talk about subjects like this. If they feel so confident that they understand what's natural and what's real, without double checking, you pay attention really carefully. Sometimes people over assert things that they don't really know, and because they say it confidently, you go ahead and agree with them. But a good scholar will point out, I don't know for sure, I'm just guessing, this is my inclination, or I heard this from somewhere. That doesn't mean it's completely true. It could be. It's a reliable source. It's someone that I support, but it's still worth pointing out that I had to get it from this section instead of finding myself, right? And I think that's important.
Yeah, everything you're saying is spot on. But it reminded me of when we were in the historical underground, and we were having that conversation about this dude that was supposed to be some religious scholar, and he knew the truth or whatever. Remember that?
Yeah.
And then I forgot who that that member was. Oh, it was Jonathan. And then immediately you hit him with you hit him with I don't know what you recall.
Yeah, I
It was
think
like
something
the
like,
moment somebody starts
start
saying
out by
that,
saying, anybody who tries to tell you that they got the truth and they
oh
know
yeah,
what it, and you talking about religion, that's like radar number one, bruh. Hold on.
yeah, they're throwing that BS. That's
Yeah.
number one. Yeah, and that's a good thing. And like, see, what you're stressing is ultimately kind of maybe it goes back to exactly where this all started, man. It's just like, are we, and it gets me in trouble. I ain't even gonna front. Do we critically take in information? Cats are going to critically give information. Do we critically analyze the information that we receive to the point where I'm not going to take it at face value? I might delve into it to understand this or that. And then for you to bring up what you said in regards to how I was presenting some facts that I may not even know, that there's certain cues that an individual could give off that would demonstrate that they're unaware or that their information may not be clear. But that if and when a person presents themselves with an abundance or overconfidence, welcome to America, because that's practically an American attitude, be overly confident and almost ignorantly confident, and people will still believe you. That's what the study of history should assist you in, and that is avoiding the missteps, but understanding how to differentiate between what seems credible, what is credible, and what is sure as hell ain't credible.
Yeah.
And that's the value of the profession, or the study. Not even a profession, man. It's just like, that's just the value of it.
Yeah, man, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah, that reminds me of when Kyrie got in all that trouble for talking about the world being flat and everybody laughing at him. What did I'm gonna mess up that lyric. But Ziggy Marley has a song, I think, with Nas. It's called Patience.
Yeah, we got a whole album. It's Damian Marley.
Yeah.
Probably.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Damian Marley. I apologize. Yeah, not Ziggy, Damian Marley. And one of those songs in that album is called Patience, and Damian says something like, oh man, what does he say? The world is, I guess I'm just going to paraphrase it, where he's sort of like, we used to think the world was flat, and now we think it's round, and now some people want to act like it's flat again, and now everybody's going to go nuts, like they can't believe that we're thinking this, when you just bought into the transition once, and so now you're complaining about the transition again. I can't remember how he phrases it, but it's a very poignant point that makes me think about the way society tends to fall in line with believing certain things, and then anytime they try to shift another belief system, they have a harder time doing it. It's like we have an easy time buying into what society tells us, But then when we try to see maybe that what we've thought of society telling us, now that we see it's wrong, we have a hard time progressing towards it. It's always harder to abandon your traditional social understanding of a thing for something new. And then as time goes on, we all begin to buy into it, and then that becomes the norm. And then people become very difficult to see how you could be being duped now, because we were duped then.
Then.
You don't know, right? So
Yeah.
don't be so
Yeah.
confident in your belief of something always, right? And he didn't say, he didn't say that to try to make people think the world is flat. He tried to make a point about how we used to think the world was flat, now we think the world's round. And then when somebody says it's gonna, the shape's gonna change again, everybody's gonna fall off, like everybody's gonna lose their mind. Like, you need to see how the structures in society can be flawed, right?
And
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. And that to me goes back into that whole notion of, you definitely have a structured approach to history. So like your whole perception of history, because I was talking about how mathematics is very formulaic. There's a structure to it. There's, and that's what I dig about history so much, is that sometimes it is artistic and sometimes it is structured. Sometimes it is chronological and sometimes it's thematic. Sometimes it can be linear, and then sometimes it's all over the place. But like, understanding that it can ebb and flow. It can at once be this and then become that. And then because now it's become that, we begin to question as to why, where we were, as you just mentioned before. And then we might find ourselves thinking that the Earth's flat again. Makes perfect sense. That album is called Distant Relatives.
Yes.
The Damian Marley, Nasir Jones collabo. We're at our time.
We're at our time, man. Yeah, we got to get
Yeah.
moving. I mentioned that term I mentioned a book, I think maybe a couple of episodes ago, by Thomas Kuhn, The Structure of a Scientific Revolution, which hits pretty well on this stuff. And I tell my students all the time they should get a copy of that. But I got a quote here, and you're welcome to either add one or accept it the way we've kind of learned how to do now. If you think you got a better one, then you can offer it. If not, I got one here, and tell me what you think. It's by one of my favorite postmodern philosophers. Postmodernism really deals with a lot of this stuff about meaning and truth, and we could use a lot of their voices now, particularly in this digital age where these devices are becoming an extension of our being almost, which is another interesting conversation we could have. But his name's Jacques Derrida. He just passed away not too long ago. He was a French deconstructionist, is what he called himself. And on my list, I got this quote from him that says, "Do not assume that what is conditioned by history, institutions, or society is natural." Jacques Derrida.
Do not assume that what is conditioned by history. And if I'm not to assume that, then what am I to assume?
That you should question that natural order. That if you're not assuming that what is conditioned by history, society, and institutions is natural, then that means you're able to open up to see if there's a change that needs to be made. Don't get too comfortable in the message that history sends, because it could be wrong. Don't get too comfortable in what institutions say or what society say. When we think of something as being natural, well, maybe society and history and these institutions have conditioned us to think that that's the case. So actually, there could be other ways of looking at the world, other ways of being that we need to open our mind to.
Right. And now I think there can be not a correlation, but there's definitely, I think an attitude exists where that if and when we do hear natural, that we see a relation to the notion that that means right.
Right.
So that because it's natural, it's right. So, and it sounds to me from that quote, it's like, just because it is natural doesn't mean that it is right, regardless if it's in our history, regardless if it's our institutions, regardless if it's in our systems. And I can dig that. I get with that now. At first, I really couldn't understand it, but no, that makes perfect sense. And you know what? As I've mentioned before, I think in this podcast, it's like as humans, we each and every single day are defying nature. So whatever you think natural is, we are the antithesis to that. I defied nature today by driving from Arlington, Texas to Mansfield at 60 miles per hour. Nowhere in my nature was I meant to do that, but you know, I found a way.
Right.
So I know I dig that. I dig that. I got this quote, and it came up to me when you said when we were talking about when you have a one-party system, there can be a notion of censorship, state censorship. And again, this is in regards to a one-party system. So the quote is from the first president of Tanzania. And if I mispronounce his name, forgive me, but you guys can look him up. His name's Julius Nyerere, the first president of Tanzania. He says, the United States is also a one-party state, but with typical American extravagance, they have two of them.
Oh, my man. How long it was before he was assassinated?
Yeah, exactly, right? I don't know.
Before he was assassinated.
I haven't read up on him, man, but I saw the quote. I was like, son of a...
Yeah, that's a little bit farther in Africa out of my knowledge with West African revolutionaries. So I was excited when you mentioned the name, but I haven't studied him enough, and I need to check out some Tanzania stuff. Be interesting to see how long he lasts.
We're a one-party state. We just happen to have two of them.
Yeah, man, I like that quote a lot.
I was like, oh man. And then, you know, when I look at both parties, I'm just like, what is going on? But, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's good. We got two good quotes, I think, today. I like it. All right, man. I think we're done.
All right. Yeah, we got it. All right. We'll catch you next time.